Let's get started. It's the 27th of March, 2024. I cannot believe we're almost at the end of the third month of the year, at the end of the first quarter. Welcome. I'm Elizabeth Talija, and I'm excited that you're here. I think I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. I'd love everyone, if you are comfortable, to come on camera, because as I've said, as people are logging on, that we are going to do some problem solving today. And yeah, there's noise in the background. Can you all see? I'm just sharing a PDF. And can you all see that? I don't like to do the full screen because then I can't see you. Okay. If at any point, I think when we're on PDF, I think that the gallery view can cover it. So if at any point I'm moving things around and you can't see, raise your hand or shout out. Okay. Would everybody please put in the chat, even though we have already started saying who we are and where we're from, please put in the chat where you're calling in from and perhaps what you do in your workplace. I know today's conversation is about empowering HR directors, and whether you're an HR director, a senior leader, somebody making key decisions for what are we going to do about the challenges, the problems, the issues, the uncomfortable things going on here in our organization. Doesn't matter. We're all here as experts and learners. We all have expertise in different areas. We're all lifelong learners. So please, everyone, if you would, put in the chat, who are you and where are you calling in from and what do you do? I am Elizabeth Talija. Most of you follow me on LinkedIn, and that's why you're here. Thank you for your support. It's exhausting, I have to say, to try to post every day. But I am passionate about learning, and I'm passionate about sharing my thoughts and my ideas and my mistakes, as many of you will often read about. Thank you for coming today. I want to share this important sequel to last month's webinar. We talked about emotional intelligence, EQ. That's where we've constantly, we never arrive. We have to reflect and think about what happened in the situation. What did we do well? What didn't we do well? What can I do next time? Today, we're going to be talking about CQ, cultural intelligence, and that's adding that extra layer of complexity to human relationships. I am an academic, but I like to refer to myself as a pracademic because, yes, I have all that theory and learning behind me, but I immediately make it practical and apply it so that anyone reading a post, coming to one of my classroom settings, when I'm doing consulting, coaching, that you can practically take it back to the workplace. We don't need more knowledge, although yes, we're all here to gain self-awareness and more knowledge. But what we're talking about today is linking the awareness and the knowledge by adding the cultural competence, the CQ. Really, really important. And I am trying to, in a very small way, introduce something that has changed my life, and that now that I'm back in the US, I'm back at the University of Pennsylvania as a professor, as a pracademic. I'm creating now a new leadership communication program for the Fels Institute of Business. What am I saying? Fels Institute of Government, working with a lot of people, creating policy and programs to make their communities better. And not just in Philadelphia, but around the world. Yesterday, I was talking with one of our students, Hassam. He is from Saudi Arabia, and he is, of all places, here in Philadelphia studying. And he is going to be a global policymaker. And in the program at the Fels Institute of Government, we're doing exactly what I'm doing here. We're talking about inclusive leadership. We're talking about communications. We're talking about CQ. I'm seeing so many of you nodding your heads. I think we're getting a little excited, and I'll try to have that calm enthusiasm. But as those of you who know me, I tend to get really excited about these things. Here are our goals in good teaching and learning, in good facilitation. We all want to know, what are we going to do? So you've seen this in my little advertisement on LinkedIn. Cultivate self-awareness and empathy. We're constantly doing that. And that is what you're doing as HR directors or other people trying to work well with others. We want to hone some of our skills, and you'll be able to do those today, and foster that CQ. Those are our goals. Here's what you're going to get. We're going to talk about a real world scenario, a scene, a situation where I was called in to help mediate the situation. You're going to walk away with 4 CQ techniques and a CQ scorecard. And those of you, you'll be able to share the video with others. You'll automatically get the video. And if you email me at any point in today's session, I will send you the PDF, which is a very, very condensed version of the PowerPoints. And you're going to have a chance to fill out a survey. I'll provide that a little bit later in our session because I want to get started and I want to think, what are you all thinking? Or I want to know, what are you all thinking? And later in the session, if you want and you are willing to fill out this 10-question survey about what's going on in your organization, what are you doing and why are you interested and how can I help you? You'll have an opportunity for a giveaway. And I will use this assessment tool with you and give you a coaching session. And the goal is to see if, wow, trying to understand diversity and inclusion in my workplace, whether it's a corporation or an NGO or a not-for-profit or an educational institution. The assessment I'm going to talk about today has literally changed my life. So there are going to be so many things that you taking out this precious time of your day, you'll be able to take advantage. Hello, George. Oh my goodness. All these people I know. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Everyone, this is great to see you. We're going to spend some time getting to know each other, but I want to jump right in. Here's a story. A respected instructor at a nice, well-known university wanted to connect with students in their history class by sharing an African-American spiritual, a genre of music that emerged during the centuries of transatlantic slave trade, really hard times, but which later evolved into the blues and then gospel songs. This professor, this instructor, was so impassioned about this. It directly related to the course content and would make it come alive. So the instructor sang a refrain from one of the most popular spirituals. A student recorded the instructor singing and it went viral. Concerned, the school's administration followed up by requiring the instructor to attend sensitivity training. This is a real world scenario. My question for you all, if you would kindly put in the chat, is this an HR opportunity or a nightmare or both? Please put it in the chat. And as you're doing that, thank you so much for everyone introducing yourselves. This is amazing. We have an international crowd, and I so appreciate your joining us. This professor sings an African American spiritual. A student records it, and this instructor is called in for sensitivity training. Sanya, thank you so much for responding. Anyone else? Ah, okay, okay. Luke, you're on to something. I haven't given you any specifics, have I? I'm being very careful how to use pronouns here. Yeah. What else? Carol, thank you. It starts out as a nightmare, but has to be carefully moved to an HR opportunity. Say something about that. Carol, would you say something? Luke, would you say something? Anybody else who would like to come off mute and say something? And then what I want to do is perhaps have 2 or 3 small groups. I'm going to allow you to talk about this in breakouts, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to share the specifics. This is vague on purpose. Go ahead. Anyone who'd like to share?
I can start. I think that, as I said, I think the ethnicity of the professor matters because obviously if it's coming from a place of genuine cultural background for that individual, I do believe that, despite it being kind of brought to attention, I think in terms of just appropriation versus appreciation, and if it's, the professor's, Anglo, background, and I would find it to be a bit odd. But I do think it still would be an opportunity for an HR, and partially a nightmare. But in terms of like cultivating genuine expressions of culture, from places, I think it's helpful to see that. And I mean, obviously, gospel music has a humongous influence over, the United States history, and obviously, like we talked about, the spirituals and the souls that created gospel music. So I don't know. I'm also in Chicago, like the birthplace of gospel music. So I genuinely appreciate just expressions of that if they're coming from a genuine place rather than an appropriated place. So that's what I would say.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you. Very, very thoughtful.
I'll jump in for a quick. Uh, I agree with everything you just said. I think in today's world, because of TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and all these other programs that the younger generations are using, they might not include all that information. So that's where I see it as a nightmare, is because our society is quick to be very prejudiced in anything that's put out there, or very judgmental might be the better term for that. And that's when the HR opportunity has to come in, and DEI or any other programming to explain to students and get them to best understand the use of social media and the understanding of what a professor is trying to explain.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Babs. Just so many great things. Marina, everyone is saying really interesting things. Bridget, anyone?
Hi, I'm Sandhya. I have my hand raised. I'll just lower
Oh,
it now.
Sandhya, thank you. I'm having a difficult time. I've decided not to use full screen anymore because then I can't see anyone.
There you
But
go.
can you all, thank you for speaking up. I think when we use the view of everyone, I think if I move this over here, am I covering up
No, you're
part of the
not.
PowerPoint?
No, you're not.
Okay,
No.
sometimes it does. Okay, Sandhya, please, what do you think?
Well, I think a couple of things. I agree with what Luke and Carol have said. I do content strategy advising, both for story and a lot of storytelling. And I think to Luke's point, I don't believe that you have to be of a certain race or ethnicity to be able to tell a story. But I do think you need to um, have an education around the culture that you are portraying so that it doesn't come off as appropriation, but it is appreciation. And of course, and I talk about this in my seminars on appropriation versus appreciation, that of course is already laden with colonial context, et cetera. So it does matter to a point who is saying what in this story that you've given us as context, this problem that you've given us. However, I also don't think that we can support cancel culture in the work that we do. And so just because it is on TikTok or whatever social media site that somebody has posted, that's a given. Everything we do is going to be in the public eye. That's a given. What has to happen is that the framing of that has to be done well, and it has to be supported by the professors, HR team, university, et cetera, because we are not going to be able to educate each other or share cultural knowledge from an honest place and support the next generation in that learning if we can't demonstrate it. Now, obviously, there are certain things that we would never say, even when explaining history, such as the N word or racial slurs, et cetera.
Okay.
But if it's a gospel that is free of that kind of language, that is in-group usage versus out-group usage, then I think it's perfectly fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. I appreciate those insights. Sandhya, thank you. George, go ahead. And then we're going to go into little breakouts and you'll have a chance for a few minutes to talk about this in detail.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. I joined it a little late, but George Sonkwa here, former student of Professor Tuleja. But yeah, I would say that I very much do agree with Luke, Carol, and also Sandia. And why do I say that? Things are changing so fast. I mean, Professor, we had a similar meeting last year, and just from last year to now, I feel like with the TikTok effect, things have changed in a tremendous way, almost to the point where, since we're talking about an educational institution, university or college, right? I almost feel like we're gonna have to start giving, having students sign disclaimers to agree that they're here to learn, right? Because if we get to the point where
Mm.
people are going to get offended about something that they're learning to the point where somebody has to be called into HR, then we have an issue. Because as Sandia said, we're going to get to the point where we're not going to be able to learn anything anymore. And I'm sure, most of you caught the accent. I'm Black, but with this accent, you can tell that I'm definitely not from America, right? So I'm Black, but I was actually born in Cameroon, partially raised there, moved to France for high school, and then I moved to the US for college. So I've been here for a little over 20 years now. And even though I've spent most of my adult life in the US culture, um, I still see the differences between the way I process things versus the way the typical African American would, right? There are things that they would get offended by that do not faze me at all. So when we talk about universities, especially given the fact that your audience is definitely not going to be just from one country, um, I believe that we have to be careful with how we escalate things or what we actually make into a big issue, especially in an in a place where people are supposed to learn. Because again, the danger that comes with that is the fact that you're actually not going to learn. So I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to add
Thank
that.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I want to hear more, but for sake of time, I'm going to put you into random breakouts for 5 minutes. And I want you to think about, what would you do? All right. What would you can take a screenshot of my next slide here for the we'll come back. This will be for, what did I do here? This should say small group or breakout. What would you do in this situation, given all of your expertise and what you're sharing? And then the other thing, just so we can save on time, how do assumptions affect situations in the workplace? And the people who have shared, and I wish I could let everyone share, but I'll ask each of the 4 groups to come back and share something briefly. What are the assumptions? And then what I'm going to do is break this down and explain to you what the demographics were in all of the context. Okay. Does that make sense? Everyone give me a thumbs up if this makes sense. So I'm going to let you go into breakouts for 5 minutes. Then we're going to come back. I will check in on you and we will continue with our discussion. Okay. And if anybody is not able to, let's say they're 4 of you in a group and 3 cannot be on screen because they're driving or whatever, come back into the main room and I'll put you in another. See you back in 5. And we'll pause the recording. So everybody who's watching after the fact, I'm pausing the recording. I gave you a little more time than I said I would, but it probably was not enough, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It was getting good.
Let's, for a few moments before I give you the inside scoop, I'd like to know what were some of the issues that you talked about in your group. Perhaps we could have one person from each of the 4 groups give us a 1-minute recap. So let's start with group 1. Who would like? Oh, go ahead, Norma. Norma, what group were you in? And I'm just saying 1 minute simply because this is only the beginning. I hope that you'll be connecting with each other, connecting with me. There are going to be more webinars coming up, etc., etc. So I just want to keep us for the time. Okay. So Norma, what group were you?
I think we were group 4, is that right?
Yeah, give us a 1-minute recap, would you?
Okay, I think so. The recap for us was that we didn't have enough true context to decide whether this was really an opportunity or whether it was a disaster. We talked a little bit about that exercise where, I tell you something and you go down the line of 10 people, and by the time I got to the 10th person, it's an entirely different story. And that the TikTok in itself is one variable in a sea of variables. And so, that was sort of taken out of context, potentially. I would need to know what the lyrics of the stanza meant and the context that it was shared in. And so it's, for me as an HR professional, it's an opportunity to consult and advise.
Good. I like that. Oh, well said. I'm going to write that down. Consult and advise. Thank you. Perfect timing. Okay, next group. Which group would like to go next? How about group 2? Or group 2? Who is someone from group 2 who would like to share?
Which one was group 2?
Oh, I can tell you. That's right.
Yeah, I didn't even know what group
expect you.
number we were.
Okay, let's say group 2. Bridget, Norma, and Roisin. Would
So I
someone-
just talked, so group 2 is done.
Oh, I thought you said 4. Listen to me. Bridget,
Bad.
group 4, Bridget, Luke, and Millie. Thanks. Brigitte, Opal, you can't talk. So Luke and Millie, anyone want to share? Millie, haven't heard from you. Would you like to share?
Sure, I can. I think our conversation was more ingrained on like just really trying to understand the context of, why these challenges are coming across or being kind of perceived as perhaps a challenge versus an opportunity. And we just really talked about again, I think following some of the comments that Norma mentioned around not having sufficient context to really understand, like the background of this individual, the intent behind, the environment where this may have happened, to just really understand more. But we just really talked about, some of the personal challenges in comparable scenarios that we have experienced in
Yes.
situations like this, where, people have felt rejected or unappreciated for trying to be an ally to others. So we kind of had a bit of a conversation about like allyship and,
Okay.
whether you're a technical expert, this scenario happens in an educational context. So we don't know this individual's background education to also determine if they have the background to really be
Excellent.
an expert on this. So, but it was a good conversation around, like allyship and being a supporter of
Okay.
issues in general.
I like that. Allyship and a supporter of issues. Thank you. I've purposely not given the details. So how about George, Laurel, and Sanya?
Laurel, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. So we were we got cut short, unfortunately. But we were basically talking about how um, specifically in this context, I think the classroom has always been or should be a sacred place, right? Where diversity of thought is encouraged and learning how to rethink the way you think and those kind of things. And how, especially nowadays, a lot of that gets lost when people's personal, your emotions get involved and things like that. Especially now, part of this example was someone recorded the professor, right? And so who knows if from that person's perspective now, what was meant to be an educational moment about this person's culture or whatever the topic of the class was is now spun as though, and just gets way out of hand, right? And that was not the intention. And so what we were saying before we closed was basically just how unfortunately, we're kind of living in a world where people we're not necessarily respecting each other's differences. And so it's always us versus them, or this person has to be right and this person has to be wrong, instead of understanding that we're all different and our outcomes and our cultures of life shape the way that we see things and understand things. And so, why can't we get back to a place where we can try to understand each other versus being argumentative or divisive?
Excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you. How about the last group of people? Now, who is the group that needs to share? Thank you so much.
That would be us, Carol.
Babs, yeah, Babs, Carol, and Melanie. Babs, you want to go ahead?
Sure. We talked about context is everything, and we also talked about intentionality. We talked a little bit about what's entering into these things with neutrality, forcing ourselves to take a neutral stance because we don't know what we don't know. And I think it's also really important to ground ourselves in our organizational philosophy and our personal philosophy. Are we out to make someone wrong, much like what Laurel just shared for their group? Are we out to make people wrong? Are we out to be punitive about that, even if someone is a white supremacist? Or are we out to bridge differences, meet people where they're at in terms of their learning journey, of the value of connection, understanding, and deepening our contributions in this space? So I think that's really important to always remind ourselves and ground ourselves in that philosophy, and then look at context, and then look at how we might be a part of that shared learning while holding people accountable where there is intentionality that is cruel, unkind, unjust, racist, etc., and giving opportunity for correction, and upholding the basic principles and expectations of the organizations that we're working within.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'm looking down to taking a few notes because such thoughtful responses. Unfortunately, this is not the techniques, the philosophies, that embodiment that all of you are talking about isn't happening in today's workforce. And what I want to talk about, and I'm going to do this very quickly because I know you're going to want to respond after I go through the CQ scorecard. So I want to allow time for that. But I just want to share these four aspects that I'm also calling techniques. It might be hard for you all to see this. Can you all see this? I'll make it a little larger. When we look at cultural intelligence.
Elizabeth, sorry to interrupt. I don't see you sharing your screen.
Right.
Oh, I stopped sharing and now I've got to share again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I don't have my glasses on. Where is the share screen? Something is going on with Zoom. It's just there.
Should be the middle one in green.
Yeah.
Like very dead
Thank
center.
you.
Yep.
Can you all see this? All right.
Right.
So when we talk about CQ, I'm just going to go through this really fast. You can take a screenshot. You will get a PDF infographic afterwards. But there are 4 things that we can consider. And this all deals with bridge making. And I think, Babs, that's what you had just summarized with. What is our motivation? Are we curious to learn what's happened? What's our knowledge? How can we find both the similarities and differences about a context? The strategy, how can we then make sense of it? And this is what you're all talking about. How can we figure out what's going on with the other? What's the intentionality? And then finally, the behavior. How do we then respond? Would you like to know what happened? All right.
Yes.
Here's what happened, and we can look at it in working with business students and clients. We talk about stakeholder theory. Who are all the people involved? The basic facts. The instructor created a vivid example. This instructor just didn't say African-American spirituals are part of U.S. American history. A student, all we know is the student posted a video. Was the student upset? Did they think it was cool? And then the administration, literally, without finding any other details, required him, and it was a him, it was a he, to attend my cultural sensitivity training, to go through my inclusive leadership course. Here's the problem that we have today with the hypersensitivity to individual identity. It seems, and because of social media, it's kind of this punch and pull. And I get a lot of that doing what I'm doing. People think I have said something and they haven't stopped to read through and try to understand. It's very hard to observe just what's happened, to table our assumptions, and to seek possible explanations. Because when we're in the heat of the moment, how do we know what happened? Was the student trying to cause harm? What are the legal ramifications for the organization? For sake of time, let me quickly go through this. And this is looking a little blurry, or maybe that's just my eyes. Can you all see this? Here's the situation, and feel free to add your comments in the chat. And I do want to come back to this in a couple of minutes. Let's call the professor Roger. He was a white male at a Catholic college teaching theology. He was a singer. He was an expert in U.S. religious practices over the last century. He was curious. He was impassioned. He wanted to show his passion for pulling everything together. And he did not want to simply say, here's a genre of music. He wanted to present this. And as we talked, from his perspective, here's what happened. And he told me, and I did talk with the administration, but they would not share any details with me. So this professor was feeling named, blamed, and shamed. He was trying to show care to his students because of his curiosity. And perhaps he assumed, or he did assume, this is what he told me, that they would all be happy about it. So he felt defeated when the students' actions of posting made the administration come to him and literally say, you can't do this. You need to attend sensitivity training. And he had a colleague who was chosen to be his mentor. He had to report back to this colleague. When we talked about this, and he went through the assessment that I'm going to share with you, and we talked about how can you be empowered, not the victim, but also how can you be empowered? Perhaps it was a white male student who shared this. He didn't know because they didn't allow him to talk to the student. Did the student like it, or was the student thinking he was cool by sharing something to TikTok? He had no idea. The learning, the coming together was shut off. He was shut out. He was the scapegoat, and that's how he felt from his perspective. He had no bad feelings towards the student, but in our sessions, he felt defeated, and he had been at this institution for years. So, what could be done? The administrators, and again, they did not want to share with me. They were curious and interested about this assessment tool. We talked about how would that help working with the administrators. They were two female administrators. This was a Catholic institution. I don't know if they were nuns or not. We want to look at the demographics, but also not make assumptions, because there could be assumptions based upon bad interactions or what we see on TV. Often religious institutions are disparaged. So I'm not sure what their backgrounds were, but they took the side of the student and immediately asked the professor or told the professor, here's what you have to do. There wasn't communication. They were worried about potential legal ramifications. And incidentally, afterwards, I had gotten from the grapevine, even though they were trying to be very closed-mouthed about it, that the student thought it was kind of cool.
This is so frustrating because there's so many assumptions being made on the part of the administrators before they even ask curious and open-ended questions. And that to me is self-defeating for everybody. I mean, instead of using this as an opportunity to seek to understand both sides, they just shut it down. And I mean, I could say more, but I think I see heads nodding. It's frustrating because assumptions make an ass out of you and me.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason why I'm sharing this example, it's not to say that the key leadership, that the leadership are bad people. It doesn't mean that all leadership are bad people. And I'm not sharing this to HR directors to say, don't do this. I am sharing, these are the kinds of situations where I get called in. And unfortunately, what needs to happen, and we didn't know enough about the student, but what I wanted to do with this organization, but they said, no, too expensive. We're going to move on, kind of table it. And I'm finding this with many other examples throughout my consulting and coaching. It's not happening. What needs to happen, and you all might already have policies and procedures. And I forget how somebody had said this, an organizational philosophy and a personal philosophy. I think, Babs, you had said this, but we all need to be looking at things, not from a knee-jerk reaction, not just assuming legal risk. If we are not coming together as a human race and starting to listen and to learn, it's frightening what the alternatives will be. However, I am a hopeful person, and I do want to let you see what I'm doing, and then have in just 3 minutes, and then I want to have a few minutes for us to have an end conversation. What I do with my work, and let me put into the chat right now. I want to show you some links in case some people might have to leave early. I just want to share with you some links about the work that I do. And if you're interested in, yes, thank you, Babs, reactionary versus fear-based. Thank you. Here are some links that you can take a look at and be in touch with me. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we're having a hard time, not just in the US, but around the world, making that link, linking the pieces of the puzzle. And what I am doing that's different from traditional D&I training, I don't like to say training, I like to say developmental learning, is that when we begin to look at any kind of diversity and inclusion from an intercultural competence perspective, that we need to constantly be learning about. I'm not saying learning about, it's ongoing. I'm using the gerund. Learning about ourselves, others, that EQ and CQ. Constantly learning and not thinking, all right, yeah, we have to do something, tick the box, senior leadership, executive leadership, or even with my own team, we have to do this. There's too much naming, blaming, and shaming. I take a developmental approach where we all learn something about ourselves. We deconstruct what's occurring. We go back to how do we bridge that gap to looking at our behaviors and our actions. And I have to tell you, I am a judgmental person. That is something that I grew up with. I'm immediately jumping to conclusions and thinking something. Oh, that person looked at me wrong, or that person cut me off in traffic. And going back and forth into the city of Philadelphia, I got to calm down. And I have to realize when I cut somebody off, oh, no, there was space. Oh, no. George, I appreciate you smiling. And we work on skill sets. That's what I do. Quickly, on a scale from 1 to 5, everyone show me with your fingers. 5 being high, 1 being low. How interculturally competent do you think most people are? Everyone show me right now. EJ, do you want to show me? We have a young member here. All right. Yeah, I am not seeing 5s. Oh, EJ is saying 5.
He's very optimistic. Next generation. Hopefully we
bless
do
you.
our jobs and this will be true.
Daddy's going to teach you that. Most of us are at a 3. All right. Even I am, as somebody who researches and writes and teaches and consults and coaches. Here are the 5 developmental levels that I work with. All of us as human beings can deny that there are differences. Maybe we're stressed or we're uncomfortable. And hey, I lived in China. Being an interculturalist, I would get so frustrated about the cultural differences. Stop tripping me in Hong Kong, on the subway, on the mass transit rail. And I get polarized, or I can minimize. I thought I was well into adaptation when I took this assessment tool that I use, but I was in minimization and that ticked me off. We don't have time because it's almost time to close, but you can go and take a look at my website on the About page. I put those URLs in the chat and see how it changed my life. I am not an ego, but I overcompensated. And until I started learning, I'll come back to this, I got a guide to teach me about this assessment tool, to help me understand how I reacted to all these cultural differences, even though I love being an expat. I love learning a language. I love all of the uncertainty. Until I began to learn about myself and my reactions. And then I worked with a group of people in a similar situation. I was in minimization and I was ticked off. I'm using the word ticked. I was upset. I could use a harder word. but I had to learn about me, Elizabeth Taleja. And what is so cool, as I'm working with other people and every day thinking about where did I fall short, where did I succeed, I am loving the experience or the feedback I'm getting. This was from a group I work with, trying to help with D&I within their organization, large high-tech international firm. And this is great because it's not just, oh, I loved it, you're great. No, it's about how are we all going to look inward and try to understand what's going on within me, within my team, within my organization. And I know I'm rushing because I only have a couple of minutes. And for those of you who are watching this after the fact, you're seeing me go back and forth to these slides. If you liked what we talked about today, if you are a leader or you're going to be a leader in your team or your organization, please go to this, and I put the URL into the chat. Fill out the survey. And I am going to choose a handful, maybe even more, of you from this small group that has come today. And I am willing, I believe so much in what I'm doing. I would like to provide you with the assessment at no cost, as well as a one-on-one debrief, because I want you to take this back into your organization. I want you to grow. I want you to learn. And yes, I want you to use my services. All right. And this is not a hard sell. I know what I am doing changes lives. And it's not that I have to have clients. I have plenty of clients. But those who have come today, you are really interested in doing this. So I'd like to provide you to have a chance. So please fill out the survey. Let me know what your needs are. And I'm going to choose a handful or more. And I will be in touch with you and we can get to know each other. So with that, I do have to end with that. We are out of time.